All Hallows Eve, the evening all your nightmares come to life. All the creatures of the night come out to play. It's time to pay tribute to this terrifying month. So join us as we celebrate a sinister season. This is the Month of Horrors. The Reboot.
Dracula follows Renfield, played by Dwight Fry, travelling to the castle of Count Dracula, played by Bela Lugosi, in Transylvania. He's warned by locals about vampires, but he dismisses these absurd allegations and heads there anyway to meet the man himself. Renfield gets hypnotised and becomes Dracula's sex slave, escorting him to London. Once there, they meet some humans, one of which, played by Helen Chandler, gains the eye of the Count, and the rest of the film is the Happy Meals on legs, trying to figure out who or what Dracula really is, until discovering the truth, and he meets his final demise, when he realises that the stakes are high.
Excellent!
The movie is based on the 1924 stage play of the same name by Hamilton Deane and John L. Balderston, which in turn is based on the novel by Bram Stoker, published in 1897. Weirdly, Stoker's novel was already adapted in 1922 with Nosferatu without permission, to the point Stoker's widow actually sued for copyright infringement and won the case, ordering for all of the copies of the film to be destroyed. Yeah, that worked.
What are you trying to say?
Carl Laemmle Jr., a Hollywood producer at the time, saw the potential in the story and legally bought the book's rights, wanting it to be on the same level as silent films such as The Hunchback of Notre Dame and The Phantom of the Opera, with the exact same eerie feel. Bela Lugosi had already portrayed the lead role in the stage play and was so determined to land the same part in the feature film, he worked unpaid to try to persuade Bram Stoker's widow to lower the price for the film's rights, truly showing how eager he was to reprise the performance. The filmmakers did actually study Nosferatu and used one of the scenes not in the original book, where Renfield accidentally cuts himself and bleeds in front of Dracula.
You're so romantic.
Despite being well respected and previously playing the part on Broadway so well, Laemmle did not want Bela Lugosi, instead favouring Paul Muni, Chester Morris, Ian Keith, John Ray, Joseph Skalkraut, Arthur Edmund Carey, John Carradine and William Courtney. Allegedly, legendary Lon Chaney was actually their first choice, but he sadly passed away in 1930 and it just wasn't to be. Lugosi happened to be in town during the casting period and tried out, ultimately winning him his most iconic role, accepting a mere $500 per week for 7 weeks, which was an absurdly low price at the time for such a big film.
Why, the man's gone crazy.
Betty Davis was considered for the part of the love interest Mina, but Laemmle did not think she had much sex appeal and went in a completely different direction with Helen Chandler instead. It was originally intended to be a much bigger production, but in 1929 the stock market crashed at the start of the Great Depression and Universal did not want to risk an investment on such an already daring film, thus cutting the budget down immensely. Due to the time era and lack of funds, the film's special effects were limited to fog, lighting, obvious fake bats, but leaving much to the audience's imagination. Dracula's transformations always take place off screen. The movie also had very little dialogue, almost a silent film in its own right. The director, Todd Browning, was known to make silent movies and he admittedly was never really comfortable with sound films. In his entire career, he only directed a few more after this. Back then, adding a musical score was actually quite limited, so much so this film's opening credits theme was actually used previously in Swan Lake and then used again in 1932 with The Mummy, but in 1998, 67 years after the film's release, a musical score was finally composed by Philip Glass. Better late than never.
I hope you will like it.
Not only did they borrow music, but they also borrowed footage from The Stormbreaker. This image of the castle is just painting on some glass in front of the camera. The original cut actually gave Carl Laemmle Jr. the heebie-jeebies. His words, I would never actually say that.
What are you talking about?
And wanted a re-edit, which infuriated director Todd Browning, claiming that some of his best work was lost in the editing room and it caused a bunch of continuity errors in the final cut. This was, however, until fans generously put together a much more consistent version themselves to solve these issues. The movie premiered at the Roxy Theatre in New York on February the 12th, 1931, 2 days before its release, and audiences actually fainted in shock at the horror that they were witnessing on the screen. This was even used as a marketing ploy to get people to come and see the film, but the movie was such a big gamble for a major Hollywood studio. It was a risk making a serious full-length supernatural thriller at the time. No comedy, no false ending that disregarded the supernatural aspect, and it paid off, becoming a box office success, selling 50,000 tickets in its first 2 days alone and going on to gross $700,000, which was Universal's highest that year.
What on earth caused that?
Astonishingly, David Manners, who played Mina's fiancé John, who looks like Billy Zane before Billy Zane was Billy Zane, lived 67 years after the film's release and claimed to have never watched it. He said that he had absolutely no interest in sitting through it whatsoever and insisted on nobody sending him any videos of it. Wow.
He's crazy.
The movie originally was only 85 minutes long, but in 1936 some scenes had to be dropped further due to censorship issues with the production code. The film originally ended with an epilogue, which is still missing and presumed lost forever, but it stated,
"Just a moment, ladies and gentlemen, a word before you go. We hope that the story of Renfield and Dracula won't give you bad dreams, and just a word of reassurance. When you get home tonight and all the lights are out, and you're too afraid to check behind your curtains and you dread to see a face in the window, just pull yourself together and know that there are such things as vampires."
Bad dream.
There was also a scene with Van Helsing having to kill a family friend of Mina and John called Lucy, who's turned into a vampire, which was also deleted. This was also the picture that inspired Richard Matheson to write the critically acclaimed novel I Am Legend. Whilst watching it, my mind drifted off and I thought, if one vampire is scary, what if the whole world is full of vampires? Well, then you get a less adequate film adaptation.
Sometimes I have me doubts about you.
Even to this day, this film is looked at as the definitive horror movie and Lugosi as the definitive Dracula, which would ultimately result in the downfall of his career as he was always typecast to this role. He delivered each line scarily, but he didn't even need dialogue, often just looking down the camera or at an actor with an icy dead stare that gave you chills. He never once blinks throughout the entire film. In fact, Bela Lugosi passed away in 1956 and he was actually buried wearing his silk Dracula cape. That may be the most awesome thing I have ever heard.
I hope you haven't taken my stories too seriously.
It's still evident how much of an impact it had in the decades to follow. Despite its cheap props, the sets still look eerie as hell and fantastic. Lugosi is still extremely chilling, and when he has to lie to get himself out of situations, he really nails the charming, suave, smooth talker perfectly as well. The lighting really does give off an ominous feeling, but I do think sometimes it really does need the music. So many times you expect music to kick in, and when it doesn't, it's just funny. I realised they couldn't because of money back then, but it just looks silly now.
Indeed.
And even funnier is his face here when he smacks a mirror away. But very often the lack of music adds to the realism. As realistic as a vampire film can be anyway. And it makes it even more creepy. Other than Lugosi, Renfield is easily the best performance. He is amazing and a completely forgotten talent.
Who wants to eat flies? You do, ya loony.
Not when I can get nice fat spiders. Master, the sun is gone.
You know, I'd just be a total dick in this situation. Master, the sun is gone! Just kidding, I totally gotcha!
You mustn't go there.
I dig films that do leave things to the viewer's imagination, and this kind of revolutionised that. Originally, Dracula was going to be shown killing Renfield, but the director decided that it would have created an unintentional homosexual subtext, so he wanted Dracula to only kill women. And then we skip to the 21st century, where Hollywood basically thrives on making vampires gay. For a film that's so short, it is definitely rushed at the beginning. This is literally at the 100 seconds mark. Less than 2 minutes in and we get...
It is Walpurgis night, the night of evil, Nosferatu.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Which is weird because later it kind of drags. The humans stand around debating the concept of vampires and honestly, it's not that interesting. There's a creepy sequence where they notice that he has no reflection, but other than that it's just kind of dull and I just wish it would hurry up.
I trust you have kept your coming here a secret.
I followed your instructions implicitly.
No you didn't. You told everyone in the village where you were going. Here, she resists his spell, but for some reason Renfield can't. When rushing back to save Mina, everyone somehow gets back to Transylvania incredibly quickly. This is a really weird time to transition.
On the throat of each victim, the same 2 marks.
But I think that's all the bad I can really say about it. There's so many creepy and eerie shots, it's easy to see why it was so terrifying in 1931 when they weren't used to such graphic imagery on this level. To this day, it has incredibly intense moments and some beautifully written dialogue.
To die, to be really dead, that must be glorious.
The original, though, is a cornerstone in horror filmmaking and will always be one of the best. It's a classic and a must-see for any film buffs or horror fanatics out there. Who else can't help but love this film?